You know, the best definition of mercy that I ever heard was justice is when you're speeding down the road. I think I shared this with some of you. When you're speeding down the road and you get a ticket that you deserve. Mercy is if the policeman comes to you and he says you were speeding down the road, but we're just going to give you a warning and you're okay. Grace is not only when he stops you, he doesn't give you a ticket, but he also gives you one of his donuts. So, if you ever want to understand the difference between justice, mercy, and grace, that's the difference between the two. Grace, mercy, and peace to you from God our Father and our Lord Jesus the Christ. I was in 7th grade, and the teacher knew that I was German. I mean, most people did, because when they heard me talk, they immediately knew that I had an accent. And the teacher, Mr. Orris was his name, he's now deceased. Mr. Orris would make fun of me being a Nazi, and he'd call me a Nazi. Or he'd call me a German, or gave me some name like that. And I didn't know what to do. So I went home to my dad, and I said, Dad, I actually said, Father, I said, what should I do? He said, Mr. Orris is always making fun of me. And he said, well, sometimes if you can't beat somebody, you ought to join them. And so I had the bright idea the next time he would call me a Nazi, I would stand up and click my heels and shoot out my hand and say, "Hi, Mr. Orris." And I did that. And he immediately gave me a week's worth of attention. You know, sometimes it's hard to be a foreigner. For example, on other occasions, not a teacher but another student gave me some X-Lax and told me it was chocolate. Well, I was going to go out for the track team. This might have been good training for it, but sometimes it's tough to be a foreigner. In our story that was read a few moments ago, we encounter a woman who is a foreigner. She has the wrong religion. She has the wrong country. She has the wrong faith. She has the wrong gender. In fact, there's nothing about her that would make her appealing to Jesus or to any other religious figure of that day. She was a foreigner, and yet she comes to Jesus. And I bet most of us here, in one way or another, can identify with the fact that we too at times feel out of place. We too at times feel that we're not recognized for who we are. We too sometimes have needs that need to be taken care of. And the question is, can we bring those to Jesus? And the emphatic answer that our gospel lesson gives us today is that we can bring all of those things to Jesus regardless of what our problems are. Sometimes it's hard to miss being a foreigner because the person's customs are different, or the person's habits are different, or their language is different. And many times, even though we as foreigners might try to eliminate how we stand out, others will point out to us, hey, look at you. You know, you speak differently. You sound funny. Or other ways that we have of emphasizing somebody's foreignness. But you know what? The Bible tells us that each one of us is a foreigner. Peter writes us about us as being aliens. Paul writes in Philippians that our citizenship is not here. We are all foreigners, and we all can have that experience where we need to find Jesus in order to help us with our lives. So this woman comes to Jesus as a foreigner. She doesn't hide the fact. In fact, it becomes very clear that she is a foreigner. But then something else happens. She goes up to him and she says, "Have mercy on me, Lord. Have mercy on me, Lord. Son of David, my daughter is severely oppressed by a demon." Here she is identifying with her daughter's problems that she talks about them as if they were her problems. Help me, she says, because she is so identified with her daughter's problems. And then we read here, the daughter is severely oppressed by a demon, but he did not answer her a word. Can you imagine how that must have come across to her? Just think about it. There's a man by the name of John Gottman, who is a psychiatrist in the West Coast in Seattle, Washington. And he has done numerous studies about the worst things that you can do in order to make sure that your relationship doesn't last. And many times he deals with couples. And one of the ideas, or one of the facts that he's identified, is that if you see a couple, and one couple or the other couple, or perhaps both at different times, give each other the cold shoulder, give each other the silent treatment, the likelihood is that that marriage isn't going to last. The likelihood is that the relationship isn't going to last. If you're in a work situation and your boss always gives you a cold shoulder, or somebody who is working with you doesn't have the time of day for you, that relationship probably won't last. And here we are, Jesus is doing exactly this thing to the woman who has such need. You'd think that his heart would go out to her. You'd think that he would say, come, be one of my children. Or you are one of my children. Come. And instead, he gives her the silent treatment. Why? Why does he do it? Why does he treat her with such disrespect? Well, there's a story that I read about a man who was let go from his job, and he'd been searching for a new job for months and months and months, and then never gotten another position. He prayed about it again and again. He asked God, show me, talk to me, let me know in some way that you're hearing me. Have you ever prayed that prayer? When you're facing a difficulty, have you ever prayed the prayer, Lord, please let me know that you love me, even though I'm going through this and I don't understand why I'm going through all these difficulties. On this particular occasion, this young man was struggling with not only having lost his job, but struggling with the fact that God wasn't responding to him. He went to a preacher, a minister, an old man, and he asked him to help him with why is it that God isn't answering? And the old man just sort of very quietly said something, and he couldn't understand it. And so he got up and he said, I didn't understand what you said. What did you say? And the man again, the preacher again, talked very quietly. And again, the man didn't understand. He couldn't hear. And he finally got so close that they were face to face, and he said, what is it that you said? And the old preacher said, sometimes God whispers so that we can move, that we have to move closer in order for us to hear him. And that's what's happening in this story. Because we read that in this particular case, the woman who hears Jesus' lack of an answer comes and sends her away. The disciples, they're always putting their foot in their mouth and say, send her away, she's a bother. But Jesus doesn't say anything. And then she comes and she kneels before him. She draws close to him. And that's important for us to recognize in our own lives. When God seems far away, that's an invitation for us to move, for us to draw close to him, for us to ask him to let his presence be known to us, for us to ask him to show us his love. And it may not come right away, and if it doesn't come right away, God isn't finished in working in our hearts, and he needs to perhaps do some more work. But in any case, he wants us to draw close to him. And that's exactly what this woman does. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. And he answered, and here now is the second rejection. Not only was he silent, and as John Gottman points out in his studies, studying over 3,000 different couples, as John Gottman pointed out, that silence or stonewalling, as he refers to it at times, is one way of rejecting. But here, Jesus is not just rejecting her by his silence, he is actually, in a negative way, treating her with contempt. The worst thing, John Gottman says, for any relationship is when one person treats the other with contempt. When the one person tries to belittle the other one, puts himself above the other one, and basically says, you're scum. And what Jesus is saying to her is, you're dogs. And remember, as we said in the children's sermon, dogs were not pets in those occasions, in those times. But he says to her, why should I help you? It's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs like you. And here he's rejecting her. He's rejecting her at a very time when she needs to have his blessing, his love, his care, and his mercy. Have you experienced that at times? Where you wanted Jesus' love, where you wanted him to be there for you, and you just have one rejection after another that may come from other believers, or it may come from your spouse, or it may just come from God himself, where he's silent and nothing seems to be penetrating your spirit. And so, Jesus says, should I throw the good bread to people like you who are dogs, who are scavengers? And then a beautiful thing happens. What does she do? Does she argue with him? Say, no, I'm not a dog. That would be my tendency. My tendency is to say, look at me. I may have 4 extremities, he said, but I don't run around on all 4. I'm not a dog. I'm not the kind of person that you can just reject and dismiss the way you just did me. I would stand up for my rights, and most of us probably would. But the wonderful thing about her is that she doesn't deny the fact that she is a foreigner. She doesn't deny the fact that she actually has come to him for help because she needs his help. She's still as vulnerable as ever, and she asks him for mercy. She asks him for mercy and says, hey, look, you don't have to change anything. Keep the bread for the people of Israel. Keep the wonderful food that you have for them. But I know, Lord, I know that you are a God who is so merciful, who is so powerful, that you don't have to change anything that you do with your wonderful people from Israel, and you can still let me have the crumbs that have fallen from your table. I wouldn't be satisfied. And perhaps many of my prayers aren't answered because I'm not satisfied with what God is willing to do. And I expect him to do what I want. I want to play God in the relationship. I want to tell him what I need and when I need it and how it is to be delivered. But she comes to me and asks for nothing but mercy. There's a story about Napoleon who was conquering one country after another, and on one occasion a mother approached him and said, would you please save my son? Napoleon said, who is it? And she identified who it was. Napoleon said, I can't. He's scheduled to be executed because he's committed 2 serious crimes. And justice requires that he be executed. And then she said, but I want you to treat him with mercy. Napoleon said, he doesn't deserve mercy. And then the mother said, if he deserved mercy, it wouldn't be mercy. Would you save his life? And Napoleon did. I can stand here with certainty that if you ask God for mercy, he would deliver it. He would deliver it even though it might be on a different time schedule, or might come in a form that you didn't recognize, or perhaps even rejected initially. God wants each one of us to come to him. And when we do, he will tell us that we have great faith. St. Paul's is a people of great faith asking for mercy.